15. Welcome to Conversations with Barbara. My guest today is Pamela Harting Barrat, who is a candidate. Well, she is asking you to vote for her so that she could remain on the planning board. Welcome to the program, Pamela, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Right. So we want to tell viewers why you are enthusiastic about remaining on the planning board and working for the town as you are on the planning board. What are some of your thoughts about that role?
I actually think planning is one of the most important things that a town works on, because you're looking at the past while planning for the future, and you know what's worked and you know what doesn't work. And so as you look ahead, that's why towns have usually a 10-year master plan. Here we have the LCP, the Local Comprehensive Plan, with the multiple elements in it. And they look at, what do you want to see the town in 5 years, in 10 years? What are we doing right? What might we change? And I think it's a very exciting board to be on. It definitely helps that I had been on the planning board prior to this for 9 years, because much of it is it's regulatory, so it's state sort of state laws.
Sure.
Have
even though towns are different, there's lots of commonalities.
Right. So it's a study. I mean, it's time consuming, and I immediately, before I was appointed, I got the town bylaws and I was looking through them, and it's nice to see some similarities, but this is a wonderful coastal community as opposed to my inland community. And so I think, looking ahead, I think we want to look at housing, and we want to look at preservation, and we just multiple things that the planning boards do in every town.
What do you think residents are looking to what would be one of the main focuses that residents would want a planning board to focus on?
Well, it's interesting, because as I've spoken to people in town, they want to preserve the local North Falmouth, West Falmouth. Each little enclave has its own character, its own personality, and I think people want to retain that. They're also looking at where can we grow to help our tax base, because there's so many seniors here, they don't want their taxes to go up.
Sure.
And I think people are concerned about the 40Bs, which is, again, a state law that until you have 10% affordable housing, that a 40B can come in and basically run roughshod over all your zoning bylaws. I think people are concerned about the coastal resiliency here, which is another element of the LCP. I've been fortunate, since I've been on the planning board since last fall, to work on that committee, which has been very interesting, and the work that went into that has been enormous, and it was passed at town meeting with the 8 elements. So I think people care deeply.
Yes, and we have issues before us. Serious ones, climate change. What thoughts do you have about doing some planning to be proactive and not just reactive to climate change?
You can't be reactive. I mean, I think we saw what happened, Hurricane Sandy and Katrina. In my prior life, I was deployed to New Orleans directly after the hit, and saw the devastation that non-planning does. And despite the fact we're quite different than New Orleans, as I drive along Surf Drive, and I think, what would happen here were there to be a terrible storm that, with climate change, I think that's what the prediction is, that there will be a monster storm. And what do? And we don't want to look backward. We want to, whether it's raising Surf Drive, or whether it's rezoning certain areas where you can't be right on the beach because the houses will be destroyed. So I think that's where our newly formed Coastal Resiliency Committee from the Planning Board, Conservation, ZBA, Selectmen, they will join together and look at just those issues so that we are looking ahead and we're not looking backwards after a tragedy hits.
Oh, that's very encouraging to know that town government is looking at that so that we'll be prepared.
Hopefully.
Right. I wonder, sometimes it's wonderful to have good people doing hard work running the town, but there's a responsibility for residents to also be participating, to at least know what's happening. How can we encourage residents to, for example, show up if planning board is having a meeting looking at planning for the future and wanting input from residents? We need to get, my understanding is some of those meetings have not been attended well. How can we get residents to come to these meetings and add their voice?
I think it's incumbent upon us to do the appropriate outreach to the community and to all the stakeholders involved when there's either an area in town that could be impacted. You just can't put a notice in the paper and you just can't flip it on TV. But I think you actually have to go door to door and say,
oh, really? What interesting.
It is. And I did that when I was with the Environmental Protection Agency, and there was a Superfund site or there was an emergency response, and in order to get people to come to a public meeting, even in New Orleans, you have to go knocking on doors and you have to say, we're having a meeting, this will impact you, but we want your input before we make any decisions because you're the person that lives here.
Okay.
And so it takes effort and it takes time, but if you plan it out properly and you contact the right people, and it works, and people come because they want to be part of what their community is going to look like.
Right. And they'll come because they've been directly invited. Interesting.
Right. And you go door to door and you shake somebody's hand, and you say, we really want your input, as opposed to reading some obscure little article in the newspaper that says there's a public meeting at 7:30, please come.
We hear that so often from residents. I didn't know how nobody told me.
Right.
So I guess we just need to work a little bit harder. What do you think about, there was a concept in planning called smart growth. Is that still an idea that people are working on?
Certainly hope so. It started, again, being at EPA, there was actually right around the corner from my office, there was the Smart Growth Group, and they were looking at how can you do development where you might have retail and then above it apartments in a transportation hub, so people, especially young people today, who want to be involved and want to be lively, but they don't want to spend a lot of time either in their car. So if you can envision like Mashpee Commons.
Oh, yes.
So you can walk to a store. If they had a train, that would be ideal. But all of those elements in the LCP, transportation, all of those things have to come together, and that's what Smart Growth was all about. So it was housing, it was retail, it was transportation, and we have plenty of areas here where we could do that. We just need to keep that train coming.
Right. That's right. And our planning department members are focused on that. They're in agreement with that idea of bringing things together.
Yeah, we actually have had any number of conversations about that as it pertains to either a new development where we do want to combine both retail and residences. And when somebody comes in with a new development, we're hoping they look at all of those pieces of the puzzle.
Excellent. Tell us something about your educational background and also more about your work background. You were trained as a psychologist.
Was many years ago. So I grew up in Maryland. I still don't say my D's, so it's winter and water and things like that. And I got a bachelor's in psychology and then a master's in psychology. And so the next step was a PhD in psychology. I went to Boston College. and was trained. I started working with children at the Judge Baker Center at Children's Hospital, and decided, having young children of my own at the time, that that wasn't the best choice for me. So I started doing training at McLean Hospital with adults, and have really focused on that. I've always had a private practice, but I worked in community mental health in the Leominster-Fitchburg area, which is a very underserved area. And in 2001, I was running for state rep, and happened to be a roundtable discussion about depleted uranium because of a Superfund site next door in Concord, Mass, and was asked if I'd be interested in working at the EPA. And I couldn't understand why the Environmental Protection Agency would want somebody with my background, like a fish out of water.
Right, a psychologist working with science.
Right. So what they were really looking for was somebody who could go into communities that were pretty upset about contamination, like happened here with the base.
Yes, yes.
And I actually came down to any number of meetings in Falmouth, Bourne, Sandwich, working on the base Superfund site. And they really wanted me there as, I'm a trained mediator, but I sort of get a sense of how to work with people, and which is so important.
Oh my goodness, yes. It seems to me that you've had a lifetime of working with communities, with people, and so I can see why you would gravitate toward wanting to do this sort of thing in Falmouth.
Well, we fell in love with Falmouth. I mean, it was instantaneous attraction, and my husband and I, sometimes when we're sitting at the beach or by the beach, I'll just say to my husband, David, just pinch me that we're really here, because it's an extraordinary community with some of the best people that I've ever met.
Oh, how nice. That's so good to hear.
We've made some wonderful friends, and because I had been so involved in the town of Acton, where I was humbly elected for multiple terms, 4 terms on the school committee. I served 3 terms on the planning board, 9 years, the Board of Health for 7, and then when I left Acton, I had just finished my term and retired as chairman of the Board of Selectmen. So you get a real world view serving on so many different boards. And
the interaction among boards, it seems to me very valuable.
Which is critically important, and one of the things I want to see more of here. I think that the planning board needs to do more interaction with the Board of Selectmen. When we sit together, or when I meet with one of the selectmen, the exchange of ideas, it just keeps coming and coming. And I think we need to do much more of that in terms of coordination, collaboration.
Would you like to see all committees and commissions doing more of that?
I'll tell you, we had a very unique situation. The League of Women Voters used to sponsor a board social every year. And when you get together socially with other board members, I mean, what do you want? The basis of communication, of relationships, is trust. And so when you get to know people, you begin to trust them.
Oh, exactly.
And so it was a wonderful, I'm actually going to introduce that to the League.
Good.
Because I think it would be a wonderful opportunity for the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board and the library trustees and the school committees to come together. Because were there, for example, a very, very large influx of children through some large development here, the school board needs to know what's happening in planning so that they can accommodate and adapt to a large influx of children were that to happen. So it's all very intertwined, and the board should be talking to each other a lot, I think.
Yes, yes, I think that either at a social gathering, that seems to me like a very important idea.
It's fun, too.
Yes, yes.
Get to know each other.
Yes, getting to know each other. And as the town has grown and as our problems and conflicts have arisen, we do need more interaction so that we know one side is talking to the other, not being surprised by what comes up. another way to be proactive rather than just reactive.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think, and in that whole idea of the boards coming together, I think having periods of public participation, even if it's 10 minutes before each meeting. So if you came and you had an announcement to make that you thought the planning board would be interested in, it doesn't mean people are aware of open town meeting and that you in fact can't discuss something that's not on the agenda. But certainly if you have it blocked out, first 10 minutes, period of public participation, because I personally don't want people to feel disenfranchised.
Exactly.
And the Board of Selectmen do it. And
it seems to be working quite well.
Exactly. And I think it's a wonderful way for people to feel included. Because here with representative town government, as opposed to open town government, which is what I came from, where any citizen could go and vote, you know, one voice, one vote.
Right.
But when you have 240 some people representing 30,000 people, I talk to people who say they came from open town meeting and they wouldn't even bother going to town meeting because they don't feel included.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to work more on that inclusiveness so that the community works together in harmony.
So you are speaking of maybe having public session for planning board as it is with the selectmen.
Yes, I would love to see that.
Perhaps other commissions too, so that I think that idea of having people feel as if their voices will be heard is really important.
And people have great ideas. So you can sit in a room and be talking and have somebody come up with something that you didn't think of. And that's what it's all about, because we don't know it all.
Or maybe even somebody wants to just announce something very quickly.
If there's a meeting coming up that has just arisen in another group and they come and they want to announce something or they want some feedback and say, could you put this on your agenda?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's very appropriate.
Right. I understand you have some interesting ideas about how the town can create more open space.
Well, I think the town has the opportunity through right of first refusal. So were there a piece of property, say people knew that the Andrews family wanted to sell the property. Suppose it was a piece of property where the heirs didn't want the property. They live in California now. And the town had the right of first refusal, where when that property became available, the town would have the right to say, I either want to buy it or I don't want to buy it. But before a developer comes in, because you don't want to get into a bidding war with a developer. Right. And it's worked very well in other communities, and I think it could work very well here, especially because we have an aging population here.
Yes, so that would certainly be a tool, a planning tool.
Absolutely. I did bring that up.
We ought to let viewers know that about the election, the date of the election, May 16th.
Right.
And let's tell them about what's going on with the planning board. There are how many openings there?
So right now there are 7 members of the planning board. There are 3 openings, 3 sitting board members, myself included, Jim Fox and John Drewley, and there are 4 contestants for the position. So it is a contested race, which I think is unusual for planning board in Falmouth.
Yes. And now we also want to mention, how long have you been on the planning board, because you were appointed?
Right. I was appointed in the fall and jumped in with both feet, hands.
So you've had
everything.
almost
6 months or
6
so.
months, right.
And just got very involved very quickly. And I'm also on the Affordable Housing Committee, and they work very closely because they're looking at very similar things like affordable housing. Good. And now that passed a town meeting, the accessory apartment bylaw, now we're going to move on to multifamily housing.
Yes, and why do you think that multifamily is such a good idea?
Well, because we have areas in town where there are very, very large homes, for example, that either There's a single person living in it now who's aging, and again, whose family may be in different parts of the country or the world, and they want to age in place, which is wonderful. But many buildings that could be converted into multifamily buildings that wouldn't change the character of the community because they still look the same from the exterior and from the street view. But on the inside, you could have dwelling units for several people. There's some enormous homes here in town.
And much demand for rentals.
Right. But,
affordable rentals.
Right. And there could be a conversion to condominiums. There could be a conversion to have 3 units, 1 affordable and the other 3 market. I mean, I think there are all sorts of ideas that the town can use, and there are certain areas in town that, I mean, we want to be careful of because we have the water issue here, as they do on the entire Cape. And so we don't want to overburden certain areas of town with water issues. We had an interesting presentation for the Cape Club, formerly Ballymead, where they've taken a piece of the property, I think it was a former driving range, and there are 28 units, 28 homes proposed. And when I talk about public participation, back to that for a second, the developer just involved the entire community of what was Ballymead into the discussions around the development of this property. And so at our last planning board meeting, many residents came to support this developer. And that's not what we hear all the time.
Yes, that's a good outcome.
A wonderful outcome. And the same with a smaller development that was presented where the developer did outreach to the surrounding residents, and the residents were so happy with the involvement that they were given the opportunity to participate.
So if the planning of that takes into account what residents are looking for and the character of the neighborhood, all those things beforehand, it certainly makes for an easier process.
Right, and I think that's what the, there's a program called LIP, which is called a Friendly 40B, where a developer comes in initially and wants to work with the town, as opposed to coming in and saying, I don't care about your bylaws. I'm going to do what I want to do because I can. And so LIP projects are very, very sought after by the towns. They want someone to come in that's going to work with them.
So it seems to me that, it seems to me that those kinds of things that residents want, keeping the character of the town, and yet at the same time being productive in finding places to live that are affordable, and also wanting to create jobs. That's pretty much a critical issue. If we want young people to come here, we need to have jobs for them.
And we also need to have high-speed internet. That's, we've talked to so many people who would love to come down here and either incubate their business, young entrepreneurs who'd love to live on the Cape, but it's costly and they don't have high-speed internet. And until that comes, I think we're going to have a hard time attracting young people. And Barbara, we need those young people because who's going to take care of us?
Oh, that's very true.
Sad but true.
Yes.
So we need to do, I think, whatever we can to provide affordable housing for our young teachers and our young nurses who would love to come and live here, because who wouldn't want to come and live here? But they can't afford it. So I think between, you know, sort of workforce housing, housing for all, and high-speed internet, and perhaps we can keep that train that continues to run beyond Memorial Day to Labor Day. I think we'll be in a much better position to attract young people. That's what I'm hoping.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you for your interest in working on the planning board. I think residents should be quite grateful that there are people with ideas and with energy who are looking for the betterment of the community. And so I am really quite thankful that we have people running for these openings. It's very important. And perhaps you'd like to say something to viewers about a final statement about your wish to be elected.
Well, I'm very grateful that I was appointed unanimously by both boards, by the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. And I would love to continue the work I've begun because I am very excited about it, and I think there's just so much, and I love working with the board. So I would very humbly ask for your support on May 16th so that I could continue the work I've begun on the Planning Board. And I thank you for having me.
Well, I thank you very much for being here, and I will wish you all the success.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for viewing. We will look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with Barbara.